Our first panelist comes from Chicago. She is the CEO of the Mom Network. Please help me welcome Allison Robinson. Allison, if you don't mind waving, thank you. Next up from Jacksonville, Florida, we have the founder of Digital Dispatch, Blythe Brumleve, sorry.
There you go, you got it.
Next up from Wisconsin, we have the president and CEO of Women in Trucking Association, Ellen Voya. And then finally, last but not least, the Chief Marketing Officer at FreightWaves, Lisa McGinty. Let's give it up for all of our panelists.
So we jumped the gun on you, I apologize. It's an impatient thing sometimes with women. You just weren't going fast enough. So. All right, so thank you all for those of you that are still sticking around. End of day, so it's the last panel of the day, it's 5:20. I know there's some drinks in our future at the end of the tunnel, so just bear with this last panel. Not only is it last panel, but it's a panel full of women that are going to be talking about some really cool women things, so I appreciate y'all being here. I think we're going to shed some enlightening tidbits for you that are probably worthwhile. Before we jump in, I just want each of my panelists to give a quick little background on who you are so the audience has a frame of reference.
Hi everyone, Allison Robinson. I am the founder and CEO of the Mom Project. We're on a mission at the Mom Project to build a better workplace for women and mothers in the businesses they support. Before I founded the company, I spent about 9 years at P&G, most recently leading the Pampers innovation team for North America and really seeing how quickly consumer behavior was changing because of technology. And while I was on maternity leave, I read a statistic that over 40% of American women leave the workforce after having children. And I quickly saw how I could become part of that statistic, and I felt like there had to be a better way for women to be able to build careers and families simultaneously, and launched a Mom Project. So we've been in market about 3 years, and we've built a marketplace that connects over 100,000 incredibly talented, diverse women with thousands of companies, ranging from Fortune 10 organizations like AT&T and BP to fast-growing startups.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Blythe Brumleve, and I am a former executive assistant at a 3PL. Started that at about 10 years ago and was also a sports blogger and sports radio host for the past 4 years before launching my own business about 3 years ago, and just recently left sports radio in order to pursue this more full-time. Digital Dispatch is my company. I demoed earlier today. Not sure if you guys saw that demo presentation, but it's essentially a custom interface built directly onto your website to help streamline your marketing efforts and measure ROI, and do that for a variety of companies in the transportation and logistics space. So it's kind of a good segue to take a lot of those skills that I earned in sports and entertainment and apply those to the logistics industry.
And I'm Ellen Voya. Is it on?
Can we get Ellen's mic on?
Test. Okay. The president and CEO and the founder of the Women in Trucking Association. Many of you in the audience, I'm sure, are members. And we're a nonprofit association with about 4,000 members worldwide. And our goal is to increase the percentage of women employed in the trucking industry. And so that's addressing obstacles, celebrating success. And I have to mention, 19% of our members are men because they believe in our mission. So
Great. And I'm Lisa McGinty, CMO of FreightWaves. Actually, was Craig Fuller's first hire. So if that's any testament, he hired a woman first. So I'm proud to say that often and happy to be here. And I know that as an organization, FreightWaves believes strongly in empowering women and bringing them into our workforce and trying to create that gender balance. So we're actually not up here to bash men and talk about how there's more men in the workplace than women. We do want to state the obvious and put it out there. And I've got a few stats to back it up. Just to clear the air, we're all big fans of men. We were talking about it backstage. We love you guys, but I think it's hard to deny that there is definitely an imbalance in the workforce in general, especially in trucking, between men and women. Particularly in trucking logistics, when you look at 90% of the workforce is men versus 10% is women. And it's hard for me to see, but if you look around what's left of the audience, you'll see that it's mostly men if you look around you. Not a bad thing. You guys bring something great to the table. I think what we want to shed light on is there's a lot of opportunity for what women can bring to the workforce, both at the executive level as well as non-executive level, everything down to dispatchers, truck drivers, anything in between. Marketing, it's not just marketing, there's a lot of opportunities, pricing analysts, operations, and certainly in the C-suite at the executive level as well. So we just want to uncover some of the things there that might be missing that some of you don't know. So I'm going to lead with a few stats before we get into some questions. Again, in stating the obvious, This is from a women in trucking study that Ellen's group recently did, found that only 4% of Fortune 500 executives are women. Women comprise only 19% of boards in U.S. publicly traded companies and only 10% in trucking, in the trucking industry. Moving on to some more VC and startup-oriented stats. This was a Fortune magazine study that found female founders in America receive just 2% of overall venture capital funding. That's 2%. That's a crazy low number when you look at the total pool of funding that's going on in the industry, especially now in a very target-rich environment. For every dollar raised by men in the early stage, women raise an average of 38 cents, and black women in particular raise an average of only 2 cents. That's from a Jane VC early stage founder survey. That same survey found that while 60% of male founders say their gender has an advantage in fundraising and in entrepreneurship, female founders stated that nearly 55% of them stated that they have a distinct disadvantage because of their gender, which is pretty staggering. So again, we're not here to bash that. I think we just want to shed a little bit of light on what we see in terms of women are underrepresented and why, and I want to just pose one question to the panel around that and give you all an opportunity to talk to it. So why are women so underrepresented in the workforce today, both trucking and outside of it?
Well, I'll take that one. In the transportation industry, women perceive that it's a very male-dominated environment, which it is, but they also don't know that they're valued and they don't know that they're wanted. So when I ask women, have you ever thought about working in the trucking industry, they just look at me kind of funny, and they don't have a correlation with how a truck relates to their lives. So we need to do a better job of putting that emotional connection to them and letting them know the importance of the industry, but also we need to let women know that there are jobs in this industry, whether you're driving a truck, whether you're fixing an engine, or you're running the company or serving on the board, that women are very wanted in this industry.
And I think that also speaks to the media and marketing realm, and where 3% of women are at leadership positions at major marketing publications and media publications all over the country. So if they're not being represented, and if they don't know, if they're not getting that message from an early age, I think it creates a snowball effect that's just a greater problem.
And if they don't see women doing the job, so if your ads aren't showing women, or if your company website isn't showing women, women don't perceive that they can do the job.
You have anything to add, Allison?
Yeah, so in the U.S. in total, we see that women are actually entering the workforce at a slightly greater rate than men. So a lot of our focus has been around how do we retain them, because we know while they're making huge gains at the entry level, they're still struggling to advance at the manager, director, and executive levels. So of course, I founded the Mom Project. We know that caregiving plays a big role in that. And as many families are building families, that comes with a lot of obligations outside of the workplace. And structurally, we're not always set up to be able to allow these professionals to live the lives that they want personally as well. So, you know, I'm encouraged by the trends that we're seeing, but certainly the manager level particularly tends to be where the biggest drop-off is occurring.
Yeah, sure, and I know as being, you know, almost a 30-year veteran in the industry, especially an executive in the last 15 plus, the women are not still making the way into the executive or the higher management levels as much as they are in some of the other areas. I do agree. I think the trends are shifting. You're seeing more and more women. We saw this at our event last year in Marketplace. John Berger, author of Datanomics, came up and talked about there's 33% more women getting college degrees than men these days. So women, we're actually seeing this imbalance of women being more educated, higher educated than men. So I expect that shift to happen where we'll start seeing more women coming into the workplace, but it's not overnight. It takes some time to feed that in. And it takes a change of mindset to a lot of people, you know, incumbents, people that are in companies today that are used to a certain way of doing things. So.
Well, it used to be that every one of the large carriers started with a man and a truck, right? A man in a truck. So now you're seeing more daughters taking over from it used to be Smith & Sons Trucking. Now you're seeing more daughters taking over the companies, which is great. You're also seeing more women starting trucking companies, which is great as well. So things are changing. It's just not very fast.
Yep. So I think we've spent enough time setting expectations. Again, we're here to shed a positive light on what's happening. And for those of you that weren't aware of some of the really, I think, positive impacts that women can have on an organization, I'll lead with a few stats and then we'll jump into some more questions. A 2018 Boston Consulting Group study found that women-led businesses run more profitably, burn less money, and deliver higher investor returns. On the women-founded startup side, they produce twice the revenue compared to a male-founded startup. That same study found that evidence shows that organizations with a higher percentage of women in leadership roles outperform male-dominated companies. Just some nice tidbits. I've got a whole library full of more, but I'm going to stop there for now because I think they set a nice stage for where I want to spend a little more time talking specifically about what else are we seeing, or what are we seeing in women-led businesses or women-run businesses as success stories or metrics that are worth highlighting. And all of you are running women-led businesses, so I think your perspective is going to be valuable.
And I think in particular, it's up to, not necessarily up to women, but I would love to see more women propping other women up and acting in a more collaborative mindset. As Serena Williams, famous tennis player, she actually just started an investment company that focuses strictly on women-owned businesses and people of color. And so if the opportunity isn't there, seeing that opportunity and investing in it yourself is I think, what a lot of women are taking sort of the bull by the horns.
But something that women bring to the boardroom or the executive level is women make decisions differently than men. Men will narrow their choices down and choose the fastest, make the fastest decision, where women in their decision-making process will actually expand the options and then investigate each one and might call someone, or it's more collaborative. We're very team-oriented, so we might call other people and ask. And that's just a leadership style. Not saying it's worse or better, but when you're in a male-dominated environment, it's not always valued.
Allison, you have anything?
Yeah, and I go back to women represent half the population, so it's critical where any important decision is being made that viewpoint is represented. I believe less than 20% of software engineers working on AI are women, and think about the implications that can have 10, 15, 20 years on our future. Or if it's designing a Pampers ad, to me it just makes obvious great business sense that women are involved where all critical decisions are being made.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've found is that women shy away from negotiation. We aren't as comfortable negotiating. With guys, it's like, I'm going to see what I can get out of this process. But for women, we want to be liked, okay? So negotiation is kind of difficult. So a lot of women won't raise their hand and say, hey, I did a good job. I'm not asking for a raise. They won't ask for raises, they won't ask for extra responsibilities because they think that you're going to recognize it. They don't want to ask female engineers who graduated, started out, took their first job typically and said, you're going to give me this much money, that's great. And male engineers, fresh out of college, said, let's talk about this. And on average, they start out $6,000 more in income, fresh out of college, which is $500,000 over the course of their careers. So we need to be more comfortable about speaking up, asking for raises, asking for promotions. And one other thing we talked about earlier, we have to just learn to say thank you. When someone recognizes women, a lot of times we'll say, I want to thank my team, I want to thank my family, I want to thank, we just need to say thank you.
And stop saying I'm sorry all the time.
Yeah.
That's another big one. I think for a lot of women, you mentioned it back in the green room that if a woman shows up to a meeting a few minutes late, then the first thing that comes out of her mouth is I'm sorry, instead of setting yourself up for success.
Say, all right, let's get started.
Right.
I think being, again, a 30-year veteran, I've worked for companies of all sizes, from Fortune 100 down to first employee, and last 15 years really in startups. I think the companies where I have felt the most successful personally as a female and through my own career are companies where I had a stronger gender balance. I have worked in companies where I was literally the only woman over a pretty broad swath. Definitely the only female executive at most of the companies I work at, and I've always found that collaboration, and I think that the cultural environment within the organization takes a different shift, a different dynamic as you start to introduce more female opinions and input points. It becomes more sensitive, and I don't mean in a delicate or an invaluable way. I think there's a sensitivity that women bring to the equation that sometimes make decisions you look at them through a different lens, and especially in a startup environment where you're moving very quickly and having to make decisions very quickly that are very, very tough. Sometimes you're moving quickly, course correcting, pivoting, and I have found that being a female to bounce some of those really tough decisions that can make or break your company, really. Being able to bounce that off my founders as the male founders, and I'm an executive counterpart, has been valuable to them, and they've appreciated that, and I appreciate when they acknowledge that. But I've definitely, just from my own experience, have felt that even at the, not just executive level, at the mid-level, having that balance between male and female makes for a much healthier cultural environment, as well as from a success standpoint in terms of just performance from a company standpoint.
And I think a lot of us, all of us can, especially women, can relate to going into a meeting room and being the only woman sitting at the table. And I heard a quote one time that said, it's not necessarily about representation, it's about normalization. And if you're not having that voice in the room, then you're not representing that person or that demographic properly. And that it's not just for women, it's for people of color as well.
One of the things that I've learned in this industry, 12 years ago when I started Women in Trucking companies would say to me, but Ellen, I don't care if they're male or female. I don't care what race they are. I don't care their ethnicity. I don't care their gender. I just want the best person for the job. Well, now we're looking at, why do women come to your company? Why do women leave your company? Especially in the driver population, we've done a lot of research on that, and safety is a huge factor, culture, things like that. So now trucking companies are saying, we want more women. We see the value in bringing women into the industry. How do we do that? And so I think we have to be the leader in taking that, doing the research and saying, this is how you can do that.
Allison, you're being quiet. I know you're taking it over.
Yeah, the point you made resonated with me because I think as we've even seen female partners in venture capital firms, the deal flow hasn't necessarily followed because there's one partner in the meeting, right? And she's not willing, maybe as comfortable sticking her neck out on a risky deal. So actually following more of a she mentality. So it's interesting. I think there is just such power in numbers because many women lack that female role model.
Yeah. Now you're female-founded. Engage is invested in you. Is that correct?
Yeah, they were just about first check-in.
Yeah. So you're a VC-funded, VC-backed.
Yeah, so we raised $8 million at the end of last year.
It's amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
So what was that experience like, going out as a female founder, trying to raise money, and especially thinking of, some of the stats I just quoted? Did you hit walls and barriers? Did you feel that it was more challenging?
Yeah, it was really hard for me. I didn't come up through like the traditional ranks. I didn't go to Stanford or Harvard or have a CS degree or spend any time at Google or Amazon. So getting the first investor to believe in me was really, really challenging. Luckily, I was introduced to the Engage team, and they were our first institutional capital. I feel like in being a female-founded business, you've kind of got to be to the next milestone to get to what you're shooting for. So luckily for us, customers like what we were doing. We had traction, and so Engage was the perfect fit because they were backed by corporations. So it ended up being like this wonderful, wonderful match, and then they brought awesome investors into the fold. In fact, Serena's husband is one of our lead investors in our A. So for us, once we got sort of through the stumbling blocks of the first round, it became much, much easier, and so thankful to have the support of Engage and Craig and the team here.
Good, good. I think we've got some other questions here we'll kind of move on to. I mean, I think this is good to set the stage of what we see as some success metrics going on in the industry and some stats behind it. But what else, how can we create more tactics and opportunities for inclusion for women? I just kind of want to dig into, what do we do to actually elevate and create more opportunity, and especially for some of the more maybe male-dominated organizations that do want to bring women in, what are some tactics that they should be thinking about? You want to lead, Allison?
Yeah,
It's
sure.
kind of your wheelhouse.
A couple of thoughts. So I think we're seeing that executive commitment to diversity and inclusion and the support of women and families as at an unprecedented level. It's really important that the rest of the organization really champions that as well. Because where we see it get lost is kind of CEO says this is important, but then it's not necessarily something that the rest of the organization is focused on. So that, and then we do a lot of research around what will ultimately make women successful in a role. Really, more specifically mothers, but 86% of women will become moms by age 44, so the vast majority of women. we see time and time again the number one thing is respect. And it always sounds obvious, but it's so important. In fact, Ellen shared with me a stat in the green room. Women without children are 6 times as likely to be considered for a promotion. So I think we've all got biases. We've got to be acutely aware of them and check ourselves. The second is flexibility. The workforce is changing so dramatically. You can really open your talent pools by looking beyond your region, your backyard, and to open up a really diverse pool of candidates. And the third is just being really intentional and supporting women. I think we're in a really interesting era in the wake of Me Too, and I think it's more important than ever for men to stand up for women and really bring them into the inner circle during these very trying times.
Well, and Allison talked about unconscious bias. We all have unconscious bias, but I think by recognizing it and being prepared for it, like one of the Hewlett-Packard came out with the statistic that said women will apply for a job when they have 100% of the qualifications, men will apply when they have 60%. And I always think, how does this apply to a driver? You know, and I've talked to women all the time, especially in the driver level, and they'll say, oh, I can't learn to shift, or I can't back, or I can't, I'm not big and burly, or I'm not mechanically minded. They've talked themselves out of the job already, unfortunately. So we need to recognize that. And also, women who speak up are often seen as less capable than men who speak up. And that's for women and men. So as long as we're, and another study that was done said that women are often hired based on their accomplishments, and men are hired based on their potential. So if you're aware of the unconscious bias and say, let's make sure that we aren't falling into that, that spot, then I think that's the first step.
Blythe, anything to add?
And I more have a feedback question from the two of you, because I feel like the workforce is changing, especially in my realm and in software and marketing, where more workers are going the freelance route or the remote route. I'm curious how that's affecting the logistics industry in general, and then a lot of the corporations that you two deal with.
Yeah, so we actually see women represent the largest majority of people that freelance full-time. And when you dig into why is that, they most often cite caregiving as the reason why. And it's really that ability to architect a work week around caregiving needs. So we actually have fully embraced the freelance model, and we serve for a lot of our Fortune 500 customers, whether it be Facebook or Netflix, a lot of their project-based needs, because that tends to pair really well with what the women in our network are looking for.
Are most of the women in your network, are they work-home flexibility, or are you placing them at, in placement within the company itself?
Yeah, so about 2/3 of the jobs that we do are project-based, and a lot of them actually become permanent employment, and then a third go onto the company's payroll as a full-time employee. And we do a lot of return-to-work programs, so Nike may say we really need to develop our female tech talent pipeline. And so they'll bring a lot of mid-career professionals back into the workforce that way.
So I think that's an interesting point, because it's not just about placing someone in maybe a full-time position all the time, but even just integrating women that, and I know as a mom, and I told the ladies this story backstage, I debated about telling it here. As a mom, my husband called me today and said I had to pick my daughter up at school today because she was vomiting. Oh, great. Here I am in Atlanta, and she's home needing her mom. But I'm here, and I know that. I'm fortunate enough to have a very supportive network at home of family that can take care of that, but not every woman is, or not every parent is. So you have to have that flexibility to be able to work from home or have some sort of schedule that lets you be accommodating. So I think that's a big piece of it. I'm in a unique situation, but I know a lot of people aren't. So creating programs that allow for that kind of flexibility, and even that sort of easing back into the workplace. So maybe it's not a full-time 40 to 60-hour-a-week job, but are there, because we can bring so much value from a mind share standpoint, from an experience standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, in terms of how we shift the dynamic in a company. I think even on a part-time basis, or on a lesser basis, that can be of value. So if those are pain points in a company where we would have to have someone full-time all the time, I think that's something to address. That just because there's females that aren't as flexible, there can be concessions that could be considered to bring female workers in, and just at least try that in your organization to try and bridge that gap and that disparity in the gender.
And leaders should know, like, often it's not a choice, right? In America, the average cost of a daycare center for an infant is $16,000 a year. So if you're looking at making kind of middle income, you can see where that math quickly doesn't break in your favor.
Yeah.
And I think that empathy matters too, being able to sympathize with your staff and with their unique situations. I told the story backstage, but there's a couple photos that have gone viral over the past month where the student arrived at class and didn't have a sitter, so they brought their child with them, and the teacher instead is wearing, what is it called? I'm not a mom.
A baby Bjorn.
A baby Bjorn, and they have the child in the little setup, and the teacher is, but the teacher is teaching, and so the student is allowed to take notes during the whole process. So it's showing that empathy in a variety of situations, I think matters.
Okay.
Creative problem solving.
Yes.
Well, good. I think we have time for one more question. We've kind of talked about, where we are right now, what's missing, and I think that we've talked a little bit how the value we can bring, and then how do we create more opportunities. What are our predictions for the future? Where do we see 5, 10, 15 years from now in terms of this imbalance balancing out and more women coming into the workforce? Ellen?
Well, in the trucking industry, women make up less than 25% of management. Half of the publicly traded companies have no women on their boards. Drivers are less than 8% female drivers are less than 8% of the population. So I think in the coming years, we're going to see a lot more women managers. We're going to see a lot more women starting their own trucking companies. We're going to see a lot more women drivers because they're realizing that they can do the job. And so, I mean, that's what we do at Women in Trucking is we get as much exposure to these women as possible so that people outside the industry can see that they can do the job. So I do believe the numbers will increase.
Okay.
Absolutely, I think the numbers will increase. Coming from a sports background, 10 years ago, the only kind of fan merchandise that you could find as a female fan was pink and covered in bedazzled jewelry. And nowadays, you can find, a variety. There are lots of women-owned companies that cater specifically to that market, and that's only been around for the past few years. So if it's happening in an area as big as sports and as big as a cultural impact that sports has, it's only going to increase.
Yeah, I'm optimistic that company and public leaders will wake up to what an opportunity women are. It's an $800 billion opportunity in the US alone if we can get to gender parity in terms of labor participation. So I'm really excited. I think there's going to be exciting changes on the policy front, and there's just really good energy, I think, happening inside of companies. And so I'm very optimistic about our future.
I'll add my final point too on that. At FreightWaves in general, what we're trying to do is certainly create that inclusion of women and diversity in general. It's not just about women, and we only have 25 minutes, so we're focused on women today, but it goes well beyond that for sure. We make very conscious choices about making sure that we have a ratio of female to male employees when we bring them in as we look at candidates for positions. We even went so far as recently we sponsored the Chattanooga soccer team, the local pro soccer team for women, and we had an opportunity to sponsor the men's team. We chose to sponsor the Lady Chat Red Wolves instead, the female team, because Craig was very much, I want to support women, I want to endorse women, I want to align ourselves with a female-led and bred organization and get the word out there and lead by example, so to speak. So in addition to looking at our own employment tactics and how we bring people in, I think it goes a step beyond that. It's participating outside of your own organization to promote awareness and support of, we believe in women out there and what you're doing, and we want to make sure that you're a part of the whole ecosystem and that you have a strong voice and you participate in opportunities as well.
And Lisa, you said something really, really important.
Good.
It has to start from the top. It has to start from the top. We can't push that diversity initiatives upward. They have to start from the top, and you have to really walk the walk.
Yep.
Absolutely,
Sure.
100% agree.
Yeah. Well, I think we're about out of time, and I think this crowd is probably done. They're ready for a blue cocktail. So,
All right. So you want
I'm
us
going to say
walk
thank
out?
you. I'm going to stand up and tell
gonna
you guys
walk
a
out?
little bit about what to expect from now. But thank you so much. Give a big round to the panel for being out here today. Thank you, ladies.